What a game. What a performance. What a controversial fixture in the Premier League. Whoever thought that there will come a time where an Arsenal versus Chelsea game will be such defining a proper London derby? Chelsea, being the home team, prepared so well, knowing very well that this was a strong London derby and Chelsea had to get something from it. At the end, both teams shared the point, but these were 1 point, but the game itself was more than the scoreline, because today I'm going to talk about this game in depthly. Now, Chelsea moved from second to third after the victory of Manchester City, and they are just 1 point behind Manchester City and level on points with Aston Villa. Arsenal lead the league 5 points clear of Manchester City. Now, Reece James put up a captain's performance. The way he was able to handle the game, especially after Caicedo's sending off, signified something. A captain who's there to play for his team and stand for his team. Reece James said something quite interesting. It's disappointing to only come away with 1 point. Why would Reece James say this? Yet Chelsea were the team that had a disadvantage. But Maresca and Arteta said something quite interesting. Maresca said that we were much the better side 11v11, but with 10 players it became more difficult, but we dealt with it outstandingly. While Mikel said, overall, I think that you don't win. When you don't win with 10 men, it's a problem. But looking at how their week has been and the tough opponent they faced, it was a fair result to them. So, if you're new in this channel, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe as we begin our analysis. Now, let's look at Chelsea in possession. And I just want us to focus with before the red card. Because before the red card is when we could actually understand what was Enzo Maresca's plan. Now, Enzo Maresca's plan before the red card, which was 30 minutes, because I think this is how the game would have played, it was quite interesting because there was a way Maresca was able to set traps for Arsenal. So how did these traps actually look like? So Chelsea would try to play from the back and Arsenal will look to press Chelsea intensely. So Chelsea expected Arsenal to press them with the front two, and that is why Maresca chose to actually shift the way Chelsea were looking to play, because Arsenal resorted to press them with just a solo presser with both of their wingers tucking in. So what happened is that Gusto would move high up the pitch while Sanchez will occupy a position where he will look as an extra centre back. That's why we kept on seeing Chelsea having this structure. So what we saw is Saka and Martinelli pushing so that they can cover those diagonal passes, and Eze picking up Caicedo while Rice stepping forward to pick up Reece James, while Fernandes will be tied by Zubimendi. But this was where the problem was for Arsenal, because doing that always meant that Malo Gusto was free in space to receive the ball. You can see here how Arsenal were well structured in their press, but a simple pass from Sanchez was able to split and take Arsenal players off the game. Here again, Sanchez in that right centre-back role and is able to play the ball onto the feet of Malo Gusto. And Gusto receives this ball. Zubimendi steps to try and apply pressure to Gusto. Gusto is able to play this ball to Reece James, and now Reece James can look to play the ball forward. And this is something that Chelsea kept on doing. It was those diagonal passes that Chelsea constantly kept on creating with the movement of Malo Gusto in midfield. Here again, you can see Chalobah with the ball. Look at the position of Robert Sanchez and Merino, who has stepped out to press Chalobah. And Chalobah is able to play the ball to Caicedo in this situation. So because there was constantly that pass in midfield where Gusto could receive the ball, this would give Chelsea the opportunity now to run at Arsenal's back four. You can see here again, Chelsea have formed that back four with Sanchez stepping forward. Chelsea's pivots have been picked by Arsenal, and now look at the position of Malo Gusto. Again, constantly the free man. So, because of this, Gusto and Fernandes constantly kept overloading Zubimendi, who now had to choose who he should close down. And in this scenario, Gusto is able to receive the ball, and now Declan Rice is left in a 2v1 situation. Should he cover Reece James or should he cover Malo Gusto? So this constant overload that Chelsea kept on giving Declan Rice is what created all sorts of problems, because now Zubamendi has chosen to pick up Gusto, and now Rice is supposed to cover both Reece James and Caicedo. Here again, look at the position of Malo Gusto. He's picking a position so close that he now has to drag Zubamendi, who was covering Fernandes, to come and stop him. Now, if Zubamendi steps out to cover Malo Gusto, Gusto is now able to play the pass in space, knowing very well that Caicedo is able to get to the ball. Now, once Caicedo gets to the ball, now Caicedo has the opportunity to play the ball in space. Look at how free Fernandes is. He's so free. And now, if Chelsea is able, and if Chelsea are able to play the ball to him, then Arsenal are in trouble. Here again, Arsenal look to commit players, and look at now the position that Reece James has picked. And Reece James now is able to receive the ball in space. And Chelsea kept on doing this drill constantly, always creating that, having that extra man in midfield because of the box structure that Chelsea kept on picking. Now, because of this box structure that Chelsea kept on having, it always meant that Chelsea had an extra man. So Arsenal tried to nullify this by having both Rice and Zubamendi picking these players in between the lines. But now the problem started to happen for Arsenal, because now Chelsea will drop João Pedro deep to receive the ball and then look to knock the ball onto the path of Fernandes. Here, the ball is played long, and look at how Chelsea players are running to actually be players who will be there to receive the second ball. So Chelsea started to win second balls when Sanchez started to go direct. Now, Arsenal, when Chelsea now had settled possession, that is around the midfield third, the game was so super dynamic in the way Chelsea looked to play. Now, one way that Chelsea looked to stop this was in the way in which they looked to arrange themselves. So Arsenal were prepared to stop Chelsea's box midfield, and they knew that they were going to use a 4-2-3-1, where their front three would apply pressure on all the three centre backs and stop them from even playing from the start, while their midfield three will be staggered, either trying to stop the passing lanes into midfield and constantly put pressure onto the centre backs. And because Chelsea identified this situation, Maresca instructed Reece James to drop into that defense line and actually form something more like a pseudo back four. Now Chelsea were having that numerical overload to actually play with calm and evade that overload. So Arteta instructed Eze to follow Reece James deeper. So you can see here, look at how Chelsea's centre backs are constantly being put under pressure with Arsenal's front three. And this was creating problems despite Chelsea having that numerical advantage. So Reece James decides to drop into that backline, and now Chalobah is free. And now Merino is now tasked to actually step forward and press Chalobah. Now Arsenal decided now to go man-to-man with Chelsea's back four. And this is where the problem started to happen for Arsenal, because Arsenal committed so many of its players like this. Caicedo started to pick up that pivot position. And in that pivot position, it was the work of Declan Rice to stop Caicedo from actually receiving the ball in this scenario. So if Rice stepped to try and close Caicedo, then Reece James would find Chelsea's extra player. And in this case, it was always Malo Gusto. So here Reece James is being closed down by Eze. Reece James is able to spot that extra player, and that extra player is Malo Gusto. And he plays a line-breaking pass. Here again, you can see how Arsenal are looking to press Chelsea man v man. And again, the situation here is Rice is forced to step out to cover Caicedo, and Reece James again is able to play that ball to Malo Gusto. So there was that constant space that Malo Gusto kept on picking that was causing Arsenal all sorts of problems, allowing Gusto to shuffle the ball to Estevao and allow Estevao to be 1v1 with Calafiori. So here you see the ball has actually been shuffled wide after Chelsea have won that ball. Fernandes gets that ball, shuffles the ball out wide to Estevao. Estevao gets that ball and is now going 1v1 with Calafiori. So you can understand that that was the nature in which Chelsea looked to attack when they were 11v11. But what about Arsenal? because Arsenal also caused Chelsea problems when they were 11v11. And they caused Chelsea problems with their build-up because Arsenal's build-up was also quite interesting. And I just want us to look at what did Arsenal do. Now, Arsenal were quite interesting in their build-up in that they did not actually build the same way Chelsea did. Because Arsenal understood that Chelsea would like to press with a two-man, they constantly wanted to have an extra player in build-up. And this extra player was David Raya. So what we started to see is that Chelsea wanted to employ the same press they used against Barcelona with Arsenal. And this is where Chelsea went wrong. So João Pedro's main task was to stop the ball from going to Mosquera and force the ball to be played to Hincapié, looking to try and force Arsenal towards the left where they would use a touchline press. But Arteta was ready for this. So he instructed his fullbacks to start very wide and he pushed his fullbacks so high. Now, because Arteta was doing this, he also dropped both Zubimendi and Rice to this position. So whenever João Pedro looked to press from out to in, Mosquera would stretch so wide and come so deeper that he will give a passing angle for Raya to play the ball to him. Look at this scenario here. Arsenal centre-backs are quite narrow and João Pedro is looking to press. Immediately João Pedro steps out to press, you can see the position that Mosquera has actually picked. And now Raya is having that outlet of Mosquera. The ball is played to Mosquera and now João Pedro has to cover ground and try to stop Mosquera from carrying the ball forward because that is his player. Again here, João Pedro is trying to force the ball to Hincapié, but because of the angle in which Mosquera has given it to David Raya, Raya is able to play a chip ball over to Mosquera, who's also able to play a chip ball over to Julian Timber, and just like that, Arsenal are able to evade Chelsea's press. And it was quite interesting the position that Mosquera was picking because it constantly gave João Pedro problems when it came to pressing. Now, the other problem was that when Mosquera would receive this ball, Timber will stay wide and Saka will drop from his right wing position and actually look to collect the ball from these positions, while Eze will be looking to make that run together with Timber. And this is what actually makes Saka dangerous and made Cucurella have no choice but to stop him, because if Saka turned and played a pass, then Chelsea would be in very deep trouble. And if Saka was able to play the ball to Zubimendi, then Zubimendi will be able to spot that overload and look to play the ball to Merino or look to play the ball to Julian Timber. So in this case, you can see Mosquera, who's pressed by João Pedro, plays the ball directly to Saka. And look at how Saka is looking to receive this ball in acres of space. Now Saka receives the ball and now Caicedo shifts across and now Caicedo stops that situation. But earlier on in the game, Cucurella kept on fouling Saka because Saka was constantly dropping this deep to actually receive the ball. That is where Cucurella actually got his red card. That's where the red card actually comes from Chelsea. Now we move on to the second area where Chelsea really struggled with Arsenal's build-up. Because Arsenal were looking to use this wide centre-back strategy, it constantly gave Chelsea problems and Chelsea adapted. Now, Arsenal employed another tactic, which was pushing Mosquera into that midfield position with Zubimendi and now forcing Neto to step onto Timber and Estevao to step on to Hincapié and Reece James to push forward to try and cover Mosquera, freeing the pass to Declan Rice, who constantly gave those angles. You can see here, look at the position of Timber and the position of Hincapié, who's actually playing so wide. And now Mosquera has come into that midfield position. He receives the ball. So you could see these variations that that Arteta was looking to use that constantly gave Arsenal that numerical overload. Here again, Arsenal, look at how wide Arsenal centre-backs are. Look at how wide they are. They're making the pitch so big that Chelsea cannot actually look to press them. And here, Raya chooses to go directly long, knowing very well that he has both Merino, Saka, and Eze in a 3v3 position with Chelsea's backline. And sometimes, Rice would get this ball and look to drive forward. Here you can see Raya looking to press. He's being pressed by João Pedro. He looks to play this ball in this midfield position once he looks to play this ball into this midfield position, Zubamendi is able to play the ball to Mosquera, and Mosquera now is carrying the ball forward. And in this scenario, Chelsea make a mistake because now you can see Fernandes is the one covering Mosquera. Reece James has vacated his position trying to press Mosquera, and he has left Declan Rice free. And this was one problem that Chelsea faced. If Reece James picks up Rice, then Rice does not get this ball to shuffle it actually towards the wide areas, towards the likes of Calafiori. Because if Reece James picks up this man and allows Fernandes to deal with Mosquera, then Chelsea solve it. Now, with 10v10 men, you saw Chelsea sitting in a 4-4-1 situation where they were looking to go man-to-man with Arsenal's attack and also looking to go man-to-man with Arsenal's midfield and stop Arsenal's fullback from going forward. Their main aim was to allow the ball to remain with the centre-backs. So what I can say in this game is that Reece James dropped a captain's performance, being able to play two roles, the defensive midfield role as well as the box-to-box midfield role, despite Caicedo getting his red card. Now, Chelsea can actually take this game as a learning curve where they can learn that they can actually play with 10 men and look to build from that structure onto the next game. So the 1-1 seems to be a fair point, but a disappointment for Chelsea, who would have done something way better when they had 11 men on the pitch. So if you've liked this analysis, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave your comments in the comment section area below, and see you in our next video.